afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Patrick Ray. I am one of the retirement advisors here at the Retirement Group, and we appreciate your attention this afternoon. Today, we've got a presentation to talk further about our non-management folks, and specifically the crediting strategies and a couple of different variables related to the plan itself. And for those of you who are considering transitioning into a successful retirement, this is part of the puzzle that you would want to learn and understand more about, so that you can see how they all interact with all the other savings and things that you have to provide you a lifetime's worth of income. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But before we get started, there's a few things that I need to go over. First and foremost, we are not affiliated in any way with AT&T, nor are we affiliated with Fidelity. And actually, our experience comes with the thousands of people that we've talked to and met with over the years to help plan for their specific circumstance and to transition into a successful retirement. And this happens to be one of the platforms that we utilize in an effort to get our material across, so people help themselves understand better what it is, the specific topic that we're covering, and how that may apply to them. So in the event that there are some specific questions that you have, you're welcome to ask us throughout the presentation, and then we'll try to address those at the end. And you're also going to find that throughout the chat, throughout the presentation today, you'll see links to access our website, that we have a ton of wonderful material for you to access. Our ebooks library, as well as our on-demand webinar series, which has a ton of webinars that we've recorded in the past for your viewing at your leisure. And so we encourage you to check those out when you get a free second. And last but not least, one of the most valuable things you might gain from having spent some time with us is to get a cash flow analysis done. This is a complimentary service that we offer, where we stress test your overall financial well-being and see how that leads into your goals and objectives to ensure that you're going to have a successful retirement. And we'll talk further towards the end of the presentation today on how to get a hold of us in the event that you wish to do that. And so without further ado, I'd like to bring on today's speaker to talk about the material today. Tyson.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, folks, for attending today's webinar series. My name is Tyson Mavar, one of the AT&T focused retirement advisors for the Retirement Group here in Texas. Today, we're going to be talking about the non-management craft, many of you union employee pension benefit plan, and some of the important considerations when considering a retirement date and when deciding to transition from the company. Those of you who are not as familiar with the Retirement Group, we're an independent financial planning organization, worked with AT&T employees for over 30 years. We have thousands of AT&T clients who are retired, some of them still working and testing our services to see if it's a good fit into retirement. But our hope is to manage your retirement assets, or help you do so after you leave AT&T, to create a paycheck, to be tax efficient, to you're not leaving any money on the table with the company or overpaying in taxes, and ultimately put together the most successful retirement plan possible. And part of that process is understanding the AT&T benefits plans and the retirement process, so you don't leave any money on the table. This QR code will allow you to follow us on LinkedIn and keep up with any of the content that we're coming up throughout the year with, as we've seen many changes happening to some of the union contracts, negotiations happening as we speak in some of the different districts. And as many of you have seen, AT&T has changed the benefits plans many times in the past, especially in the recent past. So certainly something you want to keep up with, because it may actually encourage you to change your retirement date to lock in certain benefits, or to ultimately get more benefits from the company, not only when you leave, but throughout your retirement. So keep up with some of the changes that are happening. Today, we're going to talk about the Craft Pension Plan. And although some of you will likely have a different plan that you're under, and therefore a different calculation on how your plan grows and the interest rate impact and so forth, we're going to talk about some of the important considerations as you make the decision on how to take your pension, when to take your pension, and how to make sure that you get as much out of your pension as you possibly can, so you can have the biggest retirement paycheck possible. So first, let's talk about pension eligibility. This is very important, because this is how you become eligible to receive your pension. And it also has implications on retiree medical. If you're an employee who qualifies for retiree medical, which most of the people that we work with do, here's how you make sure that you qualify for that, as well as a full pension plan. So they call it service pension eligibility, or SPE for short. They also have some special criteria that you can gain service pension eligibility, other than just having the traditional 30 years of service. Let's zoom this in here. So you can see here, 30 years of service. Does not matter how old you are when you leave the company, you'll be pension eligible. Now, there's 3 other ways to gain service pension eligibility with a combination of age and service requirements. So you can see the first one is 50 years old with 25 years of service. You have to meet both of those criteria to be service pension eligible under this particular Mod 75 benchmark. Could also be 55 years old with 20 years of service, or at least 65 years old with at least 10 years of service. Meet any of these 4 criteria, and you are golden as far as AT&T is concerned related to the retirement benefits. So retiree medical, if you're one of the employees who qualifies for it, as well as full pension benefits. There are a possibility that you could have some age penalties still, even if you hit the Mod 75 criteria, but we'll talk about how those age penalties affect your pension in just a moment. So there's a couple different pensions that we have helped people retire with at AT&T, one of which is the defined benefit pension. So this is for craft pension and certain union employees throughout the country. And it's based on a pension band formula. Many of you probably are aware of your pension band, or at least heard that term before. Pension band is a number that's associated with your income or your salary with the company. And to calculate your pension, they're going to take that pension band and multiply it by your years of service, or what the company used to call NCS, net credited service. I believe they call it TOE, or term of employment now. But they'll take your years of service, multiply it by your pension band, and that's going to equate to a monthly annuity, or an amount that you'll gain from the company monthly for the rest of your life, unless you choose one of the various forms of payments other than the single life annuity. You can see they're subtracting age penalties after they come up with this monthly annuity if you have age penalties. Age penalties, very simply, if you're under 55, you might have age penalties. If you're over 55 when you leave the company, you will not have age penalties. And we'll talk about some particular circumstances if you do leave the company before 55 in just a moment. So here's those age penalties. If you leave before 55 and do not have 30 years of service, very important, the age penalties are going to be 6% per year for every year you leave the company prior to age 55. So you can see somebody who's 50 years old, maybe they had 25 years of service like we saw on the previous slide. They'll be Mod 75 because they met the 50 plus 25 criteria, but they'll still have some age penalties. In fact, this person will have 30% age penalties. So they'll only be walking away with 70% of their pension if they leave as early as 55. Now, think about if somebody was 50 years old with 29 years of service. Well, as you can imagine, they started pretty young at the company, and we actually have worked with many employees that spent almost their entire career at AT&T. That person would be getting a 30% reduction, but what if they worked one more year when they had 30 years of service? So I guess they would be 51 years old with 30 years of service. Those age penalties would completely go away. You can see here, if somebody has at least 30 years of service, there are no age penalties. So one of the reasons you've probably seen some of your predecessors or former coworkers stick around until that magic 30 year of service. The main benefit of that is if you're under 55, the age penalties go away at 30 years of service. But the age penalties will also go away if you work past the age of 55. So there's many ways to retire with full pension. Just remember that 55 is a key age, and those modified rule of 75 criteria are important to understand when at least you'll hit those, because that's typically the minimum age that we would recommend somebody work until to get as much as they can out of their benefits from AT&T. We have some examples here. Joe is 54 years old, hired in 1990, and he's in the defined benefit pension plan. By the way, this is for many of you dependent on what region of the country you worked in. So you might be on the Southwest program if you're here in Texas, the West program on the West Coast in California, the Midwest program, the South program. There's different programs based on the district that you're in. But if you're on one of those programs, you know that you're on this defined benefit plan, and some of these issues that we're talking about are going to be very relevant. So back to Joe here. He was a cable splicing technician. Pension band for the 120 monthly benefit for 2021 was $71.75. And his service was essentially 31 years, since 1990. So they're going to take that monthly benefit times his years of service, and it's going to equate to his single life annuity or his pension for the rest of his life. So 71.75 times 31 comes out to $2,224.25 per month for the rest of Joe's life. Now, if Joe was married and he wanted to add his spouse on the pension plan, he would probably select one of the joint and survivor options with pop-up. This is going to reduce Joe's annuity below that $22.24 a month figure that we're looking at, but it will add to his spouse the ability to continue collecting some amount of money beyond Joe's lifetime if his spouse outlived Joe. So lots of options here. There's also a lump sum option. We'll talk about the interest rate implications and how they calculate that, as well as some of the things you want to consider before taking the lump sum and also on timing the commencement of your lump sum. Here's another example. Mary was 54 years old, hired in 1996 by AT&T, also on the defined benefit pension plan, also cable splicing tech. And her pension band was 71.75. Now, Mary worked a little bit shorter career than Joe, so you can see her annuity is going to come up with a little bit smaller. In fact, she's going to have some age penalties, and that's why you can see we multiplied it by 0.94%, or effectively a 6% reduction to her pension annuity. So had she stayed one more year, not only would she have an additional year of service in the calculation, but she'd also not have that 6% age penalty. And it's helpful to tool around with the pension modeler and look at different retirement dates. And typically you'll see when that number jumps up, and it's usually going to coincide with your 55th birthday or the day that you reach mod 75. And these are typically good times to at least consider retiring and maybe stick around until you meet that criteria, assuming that you can financially afford to retire at that time, and also assuming that you're psychologically ready to leave the company and switch gears in your lifestyle. All right, now it turns out there's another pension plan that is quite a bit different than the defined benefit plan. It's called the cash balance pension at AT&T. So this could be a factor of you being a mobility employee. You could be on the Legacy T non-management plan. There's a variety of people throughout the country that will have the cash balance plan, but it's calculated differently, and there's different implications on when to take this cash balance plan that would affect you differently than somebody that's on the defined benefit plan. So what they're going to do is they're going to take the sum of all of your pension band credits plus interest credits, and that's going to equate to a lump sum payout, a cash balance lump sum. Now they're also going to allow you to take an annuity option on this, or a monthly payment for the rest of your life, maybe even a joint payment for the rest of your and your spouse's life potentially. It's going to be that lump sum divided by the monthly payment factors. So let's talk about these factors really quick. Let me see if we can zoom in here. All right, so on the x-axis, we have your completed years, or your completed age in years, and then on the y-axis, we have your age in months. So for example, you can see the top left corner, somebody who's 21 years old with 21 and no months old, they're going to have a factor of 171. So you would divide your lump sum by 171, and that would equate to the annuity that AT&T would pay for the rest of your life based on that cash balance plan. Go on the other end of the spectrum, down the bottom right, somebody who's 38 years old with 11 months, 38 and 11 months, their factor is going to be 158. So it's a smaller factor. If you divide by a smaller factor, it's going to produce a higher lump sum. So this is how AT&T comes up with an annuity payout option given a lump sum cash balance, which is the opposite of how they do it on the defined benefit plan, wherein your pension payment equates to an annuity. Then they have to turn around and convert that to a lump sum using interest rates and your life expectancy. It's a little less simple. It's a little more complicated than this table here for the cash balance plan. but we'll get into the lump sum conversion in just a moment. Here's a chart on the pension ban credits. So you can see pension bans here on the x-axis and years of net credited service in whole years on the y-axis. So you can see somebody on the far right column, we have 35 plus years of service. If their pension band is 126, it's going to be a $6,032 credit for that pension band credit. So it depends on, of course, your pension band, which is your pay, and your years of service with the company and how much those pension band credits are going to be. What about the interest rate credits? Because remember, there's two components to this: pension band credits and interest rate credits. The interest rate credit depends on when you leave the company and how they are going to credit your plan, but it's going to be an interest credit that's based on 4%, which of course is subject to change, 4% per year. Now, this is pretty good compared to where interest rates are here today in 2021, or excuse me, 2022, forgive me. Interest rates are near all-time lows, and the 10-year treasury is paying just barely over 1%. So 4% sounds pretty good when it's something that's effectively guaranteed by the full faith and credit of AT&T. So this is also a consideration for somebody leaving the company. You may consider leaving your pension plan where it is. You may not want to take it right away based on your ability to grow money after you leave the company. The alternative, of course, is, especially for somebody who's taken the lump sum, when you leave the company, if you take a lump sum, you could roll that money over into a traditional IRA or even your 401k with AT&T and invest that money. So there's some moving parts here, some considerations both for and against taking your pension right away when you leave the company. This is why it's important not only to work with a financial advisor in making these decisions, hopefully with a group that has a track record working with AT&T employees and knows these benefit plan issues, so you can make the best decision possible given the information that we have for you and your family to have the most money possible in retirement. Now, bridging. Many of you have probably either yourself or your coworkers seen people leave the company and come back. Maybe you got outsourced to an outsourcing company or moved up from craft to management throughout your career. And some people that decided management wasn't for them and moved down to craft or down to the union. So there's a variety of issues that come up with bridging. One is that it makes it more difficult to project your pension on the Fidelity Net Benefits modeler. Typically, you're going to have to get a manual calculation ran, which in some cases can take 1, 2, sometimes 3 months for Fidelity to produce. This is very important in the planning process to see what you're going to walk away with, hopefully well before you retire, so you know how much you need to be saving to meet your income goal in retirement. Unfortunately, if you're in a situation of pension bridge, might make it a little bit more difficult to calculate your pension. You can't do it in many cases on the fly like most people can do by logging in and plugging in different retirement dates as well as different interest rate assumptions. So work with us or work with an advisor to understand the bridging issues. One of the neat things about people that had both craft and management service is that in most cases you'll have multiple pensions. And what's great about that is you'll have multiple elections. You could take one of your pensions as a lump sum and the other as an annuity or vice versa. So it gives you more flexibility to create a cash flow stream and meet your values and objectives in retirement better because you have more options on how to take your pension. But something we work with our clients on and something we encourage you to spend a little bit extra time with if you are in the situation of a pension bridge. Now, we've talked about the different ways to calculate your pension, but AT&T will then go in and convert your default form of payment to give you many different forms of payment. Lump sum's been very popular, especially recently, because a low interest rate environment typically produces higher lump sum payouts. Interest rates, as many of you, if you follow this, probably have seen your pension go down slightly in 2022 because interest rates went up slightly. The thing to remember is that the interest rates are based off of the November corporate bond interest rates. So this year in 2022, AT&T is using November 2021 interest rates to figure out what lump sums they have to pay people that not only retire this year, but take their pension this year and elect to take the lump sum. But the lump sum is not the only form of payment, and it's not appropriate for everybody. There's many instances where we've recommended either the single life annuity or one of the various joint life annuities. And depending on what part of the country you're in and which plan you're on, it's going to define which of these joint options you have the ability to take. Now, the joint 100% is the option that allows you to leave your joint annuitant, typically a spouse, with 100% of what you were collecting, you, the employee in retirement, were collecting after you pass. So for instance, maybe your single life annuity came out to $3,000 a month. The joint 100% annuity might only be $2,400 a month. But if you pass, your spouse will keep collecting the same $2,400 a month that you were during your lifetime. But it costs you to give that insurance to your spouse. What it costs you is more money during your lifetime. Now, many of these pensions also have a pop-up provision. You'll see when you run your projections, joint and survivor annuity with pop-up. What that means is that if your spouse passes away first, your annuity will pop back up to what the single life annuity would have been had you selected it. So it's a little bit of insurance against the risk that you don't pass away first. And it isn't free, unfortunately. They build that insurance option into the payout options of these joint annuities. But the thing to remember is that the higher the joint annuity percentage, the less money you'll get during your lifetime, but the more money your spouse or joint annuitant will get after your lifetime. In the instance of, for instance, the 50% joint annuity, you'll get a little bit more money than you would have gotten in your lifetime if you had taken the 100% joint annuity, but your spouse will get half as much as you were getting during your lifetime after you pass away. So lots of options here. Another good reason to work with a specialist that understands the implications of taking one of these various options. And also, like we talked about, we've helped thousands of people retire from AT&T. And so we can tell you about some instances of success in what our clients have liked, and maybe some regrets that our clients had for various reasons on which pension option they took. But it's important to run the numbers on all of these options and talk with a specialist about what's important to you about retirement so they can help guide you to the option that will ultimately give you the least probability of regret and the highest probability of getting as much money as possible from AT&T throughout your retirement. Now, we talked a little bit about interest rates, but for most of you on your craft pension, interest rates will affect your lump sum payout. The lower interest rates are, the higher your lump sum payout is going to be in most cases, and vice versa. As interest rates start to go up, your lump sum is going to start to go down. This is one of the reasons the lump sum has been very popular recently with interest rates near all-time lows. But one of the risks going forward for those of you that maybe can't afford to retire yet, something you ought to build into your plan is an assumption of a rising interest rate environment. And you can do this in the Fidelity Net Benefits Calculator. You can assume interest rates go up 1% or go up 2% by the time you retire. And you'll notice if you run several projections that the higher the interest rate assumption, the lower your lump sum is going to be. I encourage you, if you're still a few years out from retirement, assume that interest rates will go up, because it's probably not very likely that they will stay as low as they are right now for too much longer. And at the very least, we want to plan conservatively, stress test our plan and say, well, what if interest rates do go up 2% and my lump sum goes down 20% potentially? Are there things I need to do to account for that? Maybe plan to work longer, maybe plan to spend less in retirement, or maybe save more now while we have the ability to. So these are things that we want to look at when running the pension projections and then building that cash flow plan for your retirement from AT&T. Now, we did a little chart to show what's happened over the last few years. 2019, interest rates were pretty high. Going back 20 years ago, they were a lot higher than that even. But in 2020, they dropped by more than 1%. The relationship you want to remember is every 1% drop in interest rates, it results in roughly a 10% increase to your lump sum. So other than just having more years of service over the last couple of years, your pension has also been growing for many of you as a result of interest rates going down. But you can see here, the interest rates And keep in mind, there's not just one interest rate they fall, there's actually three, but for visualization purposes, we did an average of the three rates, so you can kind of see what's happened to all of the three rates in aggregate over the last 4 years. They did pop up a little bit in November of last year compared to November of the previous year. So most of you probably lost a little money on your lump sum on January 1st. But it wasn't nearly as bad as we've seen in some instances. I started working the retirement group in 2011. And when the company changed what interest rates they used to calculate the lump sum, there was 1 year that we saw our clients losing between $50,000 and $100,000 overnight on January 1st because there was such a big increase to interest rates that year. This is something you would obviously want to be aware of, and it might be a consideration to change your retirement date to lock in the higher lump sum and save, in some cases, 1 or 2 years worth of income and be able to retire a little bit earlier in many cases. So again, we can't predict where interest rates are going, but toward the end of the year, this is something we pay a lot of attention to and try to communicate with as many people as possible, because unfortunately what we've seen is the company doesn't do a great job of communicating the importance of this relationship to employees, and people leave money on the table oftentimes as a result. So we'll do another example here. We have Joe, 54 years old, 31 years of service. His monthly annuity, the same example as we did earlier, $2,224.25 a month for the rest of his life. Or he could take a lump sum, which, given his life expectancy, which is a function of his current age when he retires, the younger you are, as it turns out, the more money the company has to give you, with the exception of the potential age penalties if you retire before 55, like we have Joe here, is 1 year of age penalty. Well, no, he's got over 30 years of service, so no age penalties for Joe. But he's relatively young for a retiree at AT&T, so his lump sum is going to be higher than somebody who was older than him with the same pension band and the same years of service as Joe, just because his life expectancy is longer. But with the current interest rates, we projected a $550,000 lump sum. Well, what if interest rates go up 1%? Turns out in Joe's case, his lump sum dropped to $495,000. It's a $55,000 drop in one night on January 1st when they changed the interest rate. So you can see how detrimental this can be, but something that we want to pay attention to, and it should be a factor among many in when is the best time to leave AT&T for you, which could be different from your coworkers. Unfortunately, 74% of Americans over the age of 50 do not have a written plan for retirement. This is unacceptable, folks. There's no reason not to have a plan when a variety of companies will put one together for you complimentary for free. The retirement group's one of them. We're delighted to put together a cash flow analysis, no charge. You just have to spend usually about 10 to 15 minutes with us on the phone to walk through the net benefits website. We'll help you gather the information we need to put it together. We'll probably show you some things that you didn't know about in the Fidelity website that are pretty useful as well. And then usually about a 30-minute web meeting or in-person meeting to review the results. And we can give you some pointers on things you should focus on based on where you are in your career, what your objectives are in retirement. And then, of course, we hope that you do some business with us once you get to that point if you decide to work with an advisor, but there's no obligation to work with us. We hope that at the very least you had a good enough experience. You might help us grow our business by referring some of your coworkers if you found value in that exercise. What some of the things that our clients have told us that are important to them, and why we recommend everybody get a second opinion, because every advisory group's different and we might not be the best fit for you, even though we feel that we are a good fit for many AT&T employees. We think that whoever you work with should have a decent understanding of not just retirement benefits and retirement rules and regulations, but especially the AT&T retirement process. Maybe they have some references of people that they've also helped retire from AT&T that you can call and make sure that they've been doing good work over the years. Make sure the fees are low but reasonable for what you're looking for. So you certainly don't want the most expensive advisor, but you probably don't want the cheapest advisor either, because small mistakes can be very detrimental when it comes to retirement decision making, and one little mistake could completely break your retirement plan. So understand what you're paying, but also what you're getting for that, and that it's a good fit. Most people also like the pay-as-you-go route rather than paying upfront commissions. so that they know if it's not working out, they can leave anytime and not leave any money on the table. Make sure whoever you work with has an investment team rather than just one advisor that's wearing all the hats, placing trades, doing research, talking to each one of their clients. All of those things we feel we're well suited at the retirement group to do because our advisors work with clients and we have a team that does most of the research behind the scenes. And figure out what it is that you're looking for from an advisor relationship. Is it purely just performance on your investments net after the fees? Is it a user-friendly website? Is it somebody that gets to know you and communicates with you regularly? We found statistically that's the most important aspect of an advisory relationship for most retirees, is that communication. But whatever it is, do your due diligence ahead of time. Interview several different groups, see who you think will be the best fit, and maybe even consider doing a test run of their services before you retire to confirm that it's a good fit, having them manage a small portion of your money before you hand over potentially your entire life savings. And no matter who you work with, make sure that they run a financial analysis. And you probably don't need to pay for this, folks, because there's a variety of groups that'll do this complimentary for you, just in an effort to get to know you and to allow you to get to know them in an effort to earn your business. And we're one of them. Take advantage of that. It's, again, a complimentary service. We're delighted to update it for you if we need to before you retire. If you'd like to schedule a meeting with us, usually either just a 10 to 15 minute consultation, or if you'd actually like that cash flow analysis, this QR code here on the left will get you access to our calendars. We'll get you in touch with one of the AT&T focused advisors, depending on what part of the country you're in. And we'll do our best to add some value, at least in your retirement planning process. But then if you're interested, we'll tell you how we might be able to work for you if you decide to use an advisor in retirement. And here's that QR code for the LinkedIn page as well. If you're not following, I highly encourage you to keep up with different webinars and seminars that we're doing around the country specific to the AT&T retirement strategies. You can email us also at info@theretirementgroup.com, or you can call us directly at 800-900-5867 with any questions you might have. With that, we're going to wrap it up for today. Patrick, I'm going to pass it back to you for any last minute thoughts you have or any questions that we might have had come up on today's call.
Yeah, thanks. There was a few questions. I think they were fairly straightforward, so we were able to get through those through some communication through the chat. But I did kind of want to point out that, as you have mentioned throughout today's workshop, there's a lot to some potential issues that could or couldn't apply to certain people. And so I can't stress enough, like you had discussed or talked about, that firms like ours do the cash flow analysis as a way to get a chance to know you and to provide you some value so that you can start a relationship if you're looking for a partner in retirement. And when you're dealing with the variables that are involved for something as important as a lifetime's worth of savings, which ultimately will turn into hopefully a lifetime's worth of income, you can't short yourself on the ability to spend some time and interact with someone who you can trust, or at least start a relationship to trust, so that you're not forced to try to make some of these decisions when certain scenarios come up. So some of you are familiar with the inability to hold your job for whatever reason because the company decides otherwise. So it's a little different for our non-managers and of course for the interaction that they have with their unions. But the reality is to be prepared for one of these decisions that could come up to give you a chance to take a VSP or have an offer that's made for you to consider. You'd want to have your ducks in a row to be able to say, this is a good opportunity for me and my family moving forward. And so that takes some time, takes some planning. And we know that most people spend time more for their vacations and things that are going on with their kids, because life comes at us pretty quickly, as I'm very familiar, as we all are. But please feel free to spend some time with us. You can call us at that 800 number at 800-900-5867, or you can email questions to us at info@theretirementgroup.com. So with that, we'll let you go for the afternoon. We appreciate your attention this afternoon. We hope you found value in spending a few minutes with us. And till next time, we'll see you later.